Okay, I'm about to say it. Modern rifles are a lot stronger than these vintage Mausers are.
Wait, hold on a minute. Did that dog just tell us that them old Mauser receivers weak? Weaker than receivers made today? That possible. Everybody know that them old Mausers actions are the strongest ever made. That old desert dog don't know what the hell he talk about. Them Germans have best steel in the world. Everybody know that.
Actually, no, Swamp Doggy. These old guns do have weaker receivers than rifles made today. Not necessarily because of the design. In fact, the Mauser 98 is a very good design. It's simply because the metallurgy and production processes that we use today are just vastly superior to what was used to make these Mausers in the 1930s. Take this 1930s vintage Mauser, for instance. This receiver is made from the modern day equivalent of regular 1035 carbon steel. And rather than a modern style of heat treat, these Mauser receivers were just case hardened using a process that was very crude by today's standards and required clocks, thermometers, and the naked eye to get it right. Now let's examine modern rifles like this new Winchester Model 70 right here. This receiver is made out of a proprietary chromoly steel, which is produced in a computer-controlled alloying process. The heat treatment on this was done in a computer-controlled enclosure to absolute perfection. They weren't relying on clocks and thermometers or some guy's eyes for the heat treat. Now let's look at the facts here. This old Mauser receiver right here was produced from steel that's 15 to 20% weaker than the modern alloys used in today's rifles. And if you watched my knife video, you know that it's not the steel that really makes the strength and durability, it's the heat treat. And, well, you're not going to beat a modern computer-controlled heat treat process. So these old Mausers lose that argument too. Then you have to add in the fact that this old war relic might have endured levels of stress and abuse in battle that you just can't imagine. Hell, this particular Russian capture rifle, see the X right there, was probably picked up somewhere on the Eastern Front. So this rifle has seen some crap in its lifetime. Then to top it off, imagine this rifle shooting tens of thousands of rounds of corrosive 8mm ammo through it in its life. And you have good reason to believe that these old actions have probably seen better days. The strength of the Mauser 98 is in its design, not its metallurgy or production process. The allure of the Mauser is its history, legacy, and its beautifully elegant appearance. There's absolutely nothing wrong with bringing an old Mauser K98 in good condition back to life and taking it out hunting. But don't fool yourself into thinking that these old Mausers are stronger than off-the-shelf hunting rifles you can buy today. So I'm sorry, Swamp Doggy. I think I proved my point.
Oh, no, you didn't, dead dog. Them Mausers built out of super secret steel developed by them ancient aliens, and Hitler destroyed that recipe before he escaped to a secret base up on the moon. There ain't been nothing ever made stronger than Mausers. Damn, boy, everybody know that.
Sorry, Swamp Doggy. These old Mauser receivers were not made out of any special super secret steel, and ancient aliens had nothing to do with it. In fact, the US government did a comprehensive metallurgy analysis on rifles in common use back in the 1940s. If you want to see for yourself, get a copy of Hatcher's Notebook, where the details of the metallurgy and alloy composition of these old rifles are revealed in full detail. To put it mildly, the US government really wasn't impressed with the steel used on the Mauser or the heat treat process.
Don't matter none, does it, dog? Don't matter none. Mausers got secret ingredients made from the magical Swede steel. Can't break 'em, man.
You need to turn off the History Channel, Swampy. Vintage Mausers are not made out of some magical steel. Although some steel did come from Sweden and may have had a lower phosphorus content, it was still the equivalent of average 1030 or 1035 carbon steel. Modern steel is of higher quality because impurities are now easily removed and the process is completely computer controlled. With modern mills, it doesn't matter where the steel comes from anymore. In fact, most of the world's steel comes from recycling now. And today's modern steel alloys are custom tailored for a combination of attributes that makes them better, better suited for firearms. To think that drastic improvements in metallurgy and steel chemistry haven't occurred in the last 100 years completely flies in the face of logic and facts.
There's no you sneaky motherfucking Bill. Everybody know that ain't the truth.
But now some of you out there might call me a hypocrite because I use a lot of those old Mausers. In fact, it's one of my preferred receivers for project guns. And that's the problem. Everyone is an absolutist nowadays, and I'm not an absolutist. Notice in this video, I never said that these old Mauser K98Ks are weak. Except for some of those last-ditch wartime rifles, the Mauser 98s are not weak, and they certainly aren't going to be dangerous to use within their pressure limitations. You have to know what you're using, as most of these old rifles, were made to shoot with bolt thrust numbers well under 8,000 or 9,000 pounds of force. Most of these K98Ks made before or during the war were simply case hardened. So it's best not to push the limits with these. And you have to pay particular attention to setbacks in the lug recesses, which happens quick in these old Mausers with high pressure loads. Since the bolt lugs and recesses are the weak points on the Mauser 98, pressure isn't necessarily the killer of these old rifles. Bolt thrust is. These rifles were never designed to handle high amounts of bolt thrust over a prolonged period. Every Mauser action I've ever seen ruined was the result of high bolt thrust and the resulting wear in the lugs and recesses. If you understand bolt thrust, you know that firing a gun with an oily chamber is always a bad idea. I think P.O. Ackley proved that. But the post-war commercial FN actions are noticeably better and made with more modern processes. The fact that Roy Weatherby chose these FN actions for his new Magnum cartridges should tell you something. But I still wouldn't push limits with these old Mauser actions, even when using the newer FN commercial actions, which I actually prefer. I really enjoy taking advantage of top velocity nodes with many of my loads, but I don't do that with these old Mauser actions, and neither should you. Go out and buy a modern rifle for that. So the biggest controversy with the metallurgy of the Mauser is what's the difference between the war era 98s and the post-war commercial FN 98s. You can see, if you can see those marks, that is a FN 98 action. So what's the difference in the metallurgy between these? Because a lot of people seem to think that once FN started making these commercial Mausers after the war, and companies like Weatherby and other companies started using them, that they went to one of the more modern steel alloys, like a nickel steel or a chromoly steel, like Winchester and Remington and Savage and all the rest of them did. So we're going to test that theory. So I just happen to have an alloy analyzer. So you're going to get an answer to that in this video. I work in the metal industry, so I use one of these every day. So let's hit this old 1930s vintage Mauser first. Okay, oops. I don't know if you can see that on the screen here. And what you're basically seeing here is this old Mauser right here is basically just pretty common steel. You know, you see that some manganese was added because it was an essential part of turning iron into steel. So, of course, there's going to be some manganese in there. And you can see it looks like a little copper was also thrown in there. And that was probably to make the alloy easier to machine, which was very common with the tooling that they had back in the day. Be mindful that this analyzer only reads metals. So there's undoubtedly some carbon in there and probably some small amounts of phosphorus, sulfur, and silicon in this steel, but those aren't metals, so this analyzer doesn't see them. But this is pretty basic steel by all accounts. So while America and England were getting into nickel steels and chromoly steels, Germany was still using the old stuff. So let's test this FN commercial Mauser that was made in the late 1950s, and let's see what we got with this one. All right. And basically, you know, both of them had a little small trace amount of lead in there too, it looks like, but basically it looks the same, man. I'm going to call bullshit on that. I think FN in their post-war commercial 98 actions were using the same exact steel that the Mauser 98 was made with during World War II. So looks the same to me. I think I dispelled that myth. The real draw to these old Mauser receivers is the engineering and the features of them. Nothing is more reliable than these in dirty, nasty conditions. Nothing is less prone to failure. You know, few rifles are safer if a case blows, and few actions are as easily serviceable in the field as the Mauser is. These actions just weren't made for precision shooting or playing around with max pressure loads on the bench. These were made for hunting in nasty remote places and for fighting enemies in freezing mud-caked trenches. So in conclusion, the great and iconic Mauser 98 action is a piece of history that's still relevant to the modern hunter. But you can't be blind to its limitations, its main limitation, which is its metallurgy. You know, take care of your Mauser and use them within their limitations so they can be enjoyed by other hunters when you pass on and leave this world. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quick video on the metallurgy of the Mauser. Be sure to hit subscribe to view past and future videos by me. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.